Rochester was like any typical city, urban area, that we were being overwhelmed by drug crimes, possession of drugs, street corner sale of drugs.
The state of New York passed these laws that were considered by many to be the most draconian in the country, and they provided for life in prison for the sale of any amount of a controlled substance.
And we were warehousing defendants in and out of the court system, in and out of probation, in and out of county jail, and in and out of state prison. And it wasn't working.
Well, we had seen a huge increase in, the introduction of crack cocaine to the city. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, what is this plague that has arrived on our door?
Really, it was like a tidal wave coming over us. There were so many drug cases, so our docket was being crushed. The sheriff who runs the local jail, the holding facility, was filled way past capacity, and they were letting the drug users back out to hold up the more violent people. What we're finding is that the drug abusers and users were picking up 2 and 3 cases by the time we could get them on the first case into court. So we were really awash in drugs.
Baltimore, unfortunately, suffers the reputation of being one of the drug capitals of the country. So in the 90s, we became overwhelmed by drug cases and drug-related cases. It was really frustrating. Everyone is a victim to drugs. It is like a pebble being tossed into the lake. It has rippling effects. I started to notice, to really think about what I could do as a judge to try to change that.
But the light bulb went on for all of us when we learned about the model that was being used in Miami.
Cocaine in this town was plentiful, it was strong, and it was cheap.
We had 50,000 felony arrests. 70% or more of the felony arrests, people had drugs in their system. So, it didn't take a mathematician to figure out that there was a direct correlation between drugs and crime, and that we had to do something about it.
And the war on drugs was almost an armed conflict. It was a war about punishment. When people are faced with swift and certain punishment, they'll decide not to become addicts. If they do become addicted, then they'll take what they deserve.
This idea of people would rather be addicts. No, men don't want to be on the street, sleeping on the street. Women don't want to prostitute themselves. So nobody convinced me the addict wants to be an addict. He wants the opportunity, he or she wants the opportunity to not be an addict.
Against this national tide, pulling everyone towards punishment, to go in the opposite direction, with no outside money, with no local support, one man led a team that instead called for treating each individual as an individual, never giving up hope in the human spirit, driven only by the moral compass of Herbert Klein and a group of individuals who loved not only Judge Klein, but what he stood for and what he believed in, because we all believed in it.
It was a statement by us that the human beings are worth redeeming. We started what was known as diversion and treatment program, which eventually became the drug court.
I was petrified, and I was petrified because the general feelings in the community was that everybody that was an addict was also a criminal, and that jail is the place they belong.
Our first judge was Stanley Goldstein.
And I said, not Stanley Goldstein, whatever you do, not Stanley. I was looking for someone more photogenic, younger, perhaps female judge.
All rise. Circuit Court in Fort Dade County is now in session. The Honorable Stanley Goldstein presiding.
Instead, they're giving us this ex-cop from Brooklyn, wears his Brooklyn accent on his sleeve. He's crusty, he's crotchety, he's cranky. I don't want to work with this guy. I want to work with a drug court judge.
I want to see a little enthusiasm out there. You are clean now, I hope?
Oh, yes.
You haven't been getting anything over to jail?
Nah.
What are you grinning about? Okay. It's easier to stay clean than it is to get clean, so you got one step on.
Well, it turns out that Stanley Goldstein set the mold for drug court judges for years to come. And before long, we're on national TV as the lead segment on ABC's Nightline.
Keeping addicts behind bars is expensive. Florida has found it costs $17,000 a year to keep a prisoner locked up, but only $700 a year to keep someone out of prison and in a drug treatment program.
The very next day, I started getting calls from around the country, from judges, from prosecutors.
You know, I just think it was the right thing to do. And I mean, you know, what should you do? And where should you follow? Where should you push? If you want to do something, leave the place better than when you got there.
We were all pretty thrilled. Wow, somebody from Portland came all the way to Miami to look at our little program. That's real. Wait a minute, there's somebody else. And then we had somebody from Baltimore, Rochester, New York.
And they talked about their concept for 3 or 4 days, and I fell in love with the concept.
It exposed me to alternatives that just made sense.
I says, this is going to work. This is the ingredient I'm missing. And so I came back to Rochester, New York, bound and determined to start a drug treatment court here.
Each of the visitors from around the country left wanting to start a drug court that was better than the Miami court.
I think at first people's perception was, because instead of this lock 'em up mentality, it was like, you're going to call them clients? You're not going to call them defendants? You're not going to call them criminals?
The police were wondering, what are these people doing? They're not going to lock them up? Well, no, Chief. We don't have room to lock them up. The sheriff doesn't have room anyway.
Well, a lot of people considered us fuzzy-headed because we were trying to help people.
When I first met with the court administrators who I report to, I hit a brick wall. The local politicians, well, no, that's soft on crime. Well, look, I'm a judge. I'm part of the system. I knew what I was doing was wasting taxpayers' dollars. So if the problem was put on my lap by bringing these addicts into the courtroom and asking me to do something with them, I was going to do something that actually worked. So we went into the community.
The public got it, and this made sense. This had a chance to work. This looked like it was going to work, and throwing them in jail they know didn't work. So where politicians thought, oh, the sizzle on the steak is to sell tough on crime, the public said, forget that. This is going to work.
But over time, I think what people began to see is that early, intensive intervention is what is needed for the substance abusing population.
And so I think that it was everybody coming together and wanting to see it succeed. And it did. It did.
For me, it was a wonderful opportunity to see my role as a prosecutor as a completely different role, to be able to see people over and over and over again, and then you really get to know them, and you get to know their story, and you get to know their family history, and you get to know their struggles. I think I started to see in those first couple of weeks how this could be really a life-changing experience for a prosecutor.
I think what I find truly amazing about drug court is that the treatment team is there so that the client cannot fail.
Can't remember how many times I sat in this courtroom and Judge Hawes would be a recommendation from the treatment people to violate the person, kick them out of the program, and because it's their third, fourth, seventh time that they've failed to show up, or they failed to do this or that, and so it was maybe one last chance, one last ever chance. Well, really, this is a last chance. Poor deputy, Your Honor, you know, this is his 6th time. Well, I'll give you one more, and I'm telling you, we're gonna send you to jail.
We had a similar experience in Miami with Stanley Goldstein, who would never throw anybody out of the program. And we would pull him into chambers and say, Stanley, just throw one guy out. We don't care who it is, but just throw somebody out of the program so we can have some credibility. And Stanley would say, I throw the guy out of the program, he goes down the street, he gets stoned, he gets arrested, he comes back, and we have him all over again. Where does that get us? He stays in the program.
I remember one of my first drug court participants begged me to let her go. She said, I can't do this, I cannot stay clean. I'd rather just do my time. Thank you for everything you're doing, Judge, but please let me go. In the nicest sort of way. And I said, no, not on my watch. And I made her stay in drug court. And yes, of course, she graduated. She reunited with her family. She had a very responsible job. And as far as I know, is still clean.
Over time, it just seemed to be working, and people seemed to be getting better. And you know, when you have graduations, they're amazing. They're very emotional.
The first time anyone applauded a client who did well in a drug court, Stanley Goldstein was leading that applause. The first time a judge came down from the bench in his robe, put his arms around someone and hugged them because they had done well, Stanley Goldstein was doing the hugging.
Every graduation is like that. It's like your payoff for doing this job is going to graduation.
We hug everybody in drug court, hug each other, hug the defendants, but it's not just the hugging, it's what the hugging represents. It's a verbal or tangible representation of success.
I had a kiddo in juvenile drug court. He came to court one day and I had a certificate for him for something, and I said to him, "I am so proud of you." And he started crying. And there were other kids sitting out in the courtroom, and I started crying. It was just one of those that it was like, oh my God. And after he had left, I mean, we tried not to make a big deal of it. After he left, his juvenile diversion manager came to me and said, he told me outside that no one has ever said to him they were proud of him. It brought home to me so clearly the power of words.
You know, when you've had a life of failing, to have that many people around you saying, I'm not going to let you fail again, I think that's another reason we have such a high success rate.
When we go back to the beginning of drug court, or certainly my beginnings in drug court, clearly a lot of people at the time thought that drug court was a flash in the pan, that it was a radical idea that would never catch on. And here we are 25 years later with drug court as probably the mainstream approach of the criminal justice system to drug abuse.
What we're trying to do is the right thing. We are trying to bring these people back to the table that we call America. America is an ingenious place, and the people are people of goodwill. And so people of goodwill are doing something worthwhile. And so they felt good about it. It's amazing how good you feel when you do something worthwhile.
I'm very, very proud that I got to be involved. Incredibly proud of the program that I think we all created, and that it's still in existence and it's still going strong is a testament to a lot of hard work by a lot of people. There's a whole community of people out there that want to support these folks and having a stable life. It's good for our community. It's good for the world. So
it is extraordinary as a judge to hear a participant say to you, I'm well now. I have my children back in my life because of you, Judge, because of this program. And they thank their probation agent and hug them. Thank the prosecutor who's trying to keep them out of jail, not in jail.
No, I feel certain that drug court saves lives. It repairs families. It heals people. It heals the people who work in it, quite honestly. Being allowed to work as a part of a team, to collaborate with one another instead of, you know, this is my thing and this is your thing and that's your thing, and, you know, we each have our little corners and we'll do our thing. I think people feel empowered by being a part of a collaborative effort like that.
There is no greater feeling as a judge or reward, or what, you can use any word you want, to hear, thank you, you saved my life. And that gives you great pride. And it makes it worthwhile. You know, I could write the greatest decision in the world, and the Supreme Court of the United States could say, you know, that lower court judge, that was the greatest opinion we've ever read in the whole world. I'd rather have someone walk up to me and say, thank you, you saved my life.
Well, I think my consciousness, the consciousness of the addict, and the consciousness of the community changed because we were helping people. We were acknowledging that there are people who needed to be helped. You know, America has always been that way, and continues to be that way. We help people. We don't hurt people, we help people. Maybe some Americans forgot that that's what we're about.